Hey guys, Brian from Boas here. Becoming proficient as a breeder and keeper of boas and other reptiles requires a very long time and many years of practice and experience. So how exactly do you measure the experience of a boa keeper? That's the question that we're going to discuss today. So I'm sure you've noticed that these days we are just assaulted with a plethora of information about keeping boas and other reptiles. From books, to websites, to forums, to Facebook groups, to YouTube channels like this one, there's definitely no shortage of people giving you advice. And some of the advice is good, some of it's great, some of it's kind of mediocre, a lot of it is just plain wrong, and much of it doesn't necessarily apply to your situation. So you have to figure out how to sift through all of these messages. One good way to decide which information to pay attention to is to look at the credibility of the person that's making the statement. And so, in general, you would probably give more credence to someone with a lot of experience doing this than someone that just started and is really just repeating what they heard on a Facebook BOA group. So when you're getting into reptiles, there's obviously, you start off by looking at the available information, but then you have to really take it from there based on your own experience to figure things out. And as a person with a background in music, having spent many hours of my life practicing musical instruments, I often use the analogy to learning a musical instrument. So say you want to learn how to play guitar. You go first, you probably would look at some books, you'd read some advice on forums, things like that, and that would be your foundation of knowledge. But then you need to take that knowledge and really apply it and learn it. And it's going to come down to lots and lots of practice, day after day, week after week, year after year, until you hone your skills. Practicing scales and chord exercises, practicing fingering exercises to hone your manual dexterity, and then learning lots of different songs and really building up a competency in a certain repertoire. And that's really how you do music. The way to become proficient in reptile keeping and breeding has a similar type of approach. We start off with the information that we're presented from multiple sources. We take what seems to be applicable to our situation, and then we put it into practice. We see what works and what doesn't work, and then we go repeat the cycle. You're going to repeat the same basic maneuvers over and over again, countless times over the years. Feeding snakes, cleaning snake cages, getting boas ready to breed, pairing them up, sexing baby boas, getting baby boas acclimated and feeding, getting them sold and shipped off to their new home. And so every year you do this, you learn a little bit more about what works the best, what's not working, what things can be tweaked, and what things you need to improve on for the next year. And so it's a constant learning experience. And every year that I do this, I'm doing things a little bit differently. And now that I'm gearing up for the 2022 boa breeding season, I'm going to take some of the knowledge that I learned in 2021 and apply it to my next year with the hope that I'm going to be a little bit more successful than I was in the past. We'll just have to see if that's the case. Okay, so hopefully I've convinced you of the importance of practice and experience when building up your competencies as a boa keeper and breeder. But how exactly do we measure one's level of experience in keeping boas? Well, one way I recently read about on the blog of the highly esteemed python and boa breeder, David Barker from VPI. And so David proposed the concept of a snake year. And a snake year is a unit of experience keeping snakes. And what it represents is the full-time maintenance of one snake for 1 year. And so you can mix and match. Basically, you're taking the number of snakes you're maintaining, multiplying by the number of years you're maintaining them, and that is the number of snake years of experience that you have. And so, for example, a unit of 100 snake years, one could get this amount of experience by keeping 2 snakes for 50 years. And since most snakes don't live that long, you would have to replace the snakes. Or you could keep 5 snakes for 20 years. Or you could keep 10 snakes for 10 years. Or 100 snakes for a year. Or even 1,000 snakes for 1/10 of a year, which is about 36.5 days. So any of those units of experience would be equal to 100 snake years. And so we can see that the people that keep large amounts of snakes are going to get experience a lot faster than people that keep smaller numbers of snakes. And this isn't a perfect measure, but I think it gives a pretty good idea about experience one has keeping snakes in order to compare their level of knowledge. And we could even further break it down. This is the concept of the snake year. We could break it down by the type of snake. And for example, I've kept mainly boas. The vast majority of my experience would be in boa years. The number of boas I've kept times the number of years. If you have a specialty, for example, in keeping green tree pythons or mountain king snakes or whatever type of reptile, you could figure out your amount of years of experience doing that times the number of animals, and that would give you an experience metric in order to compare to other people. After reading David Barker's blog about snake years, I was inspired to try to estimate my own experience level in terms of snake years. And it was somewhat hard to estimate because, of course, I wasn't keeping records of how many snakes I had for a lot of my snake keeping experience. In fact, it probably goes back almost 40 years to when I was a relatively small child. And, at that time, I probably had like one snake at a time. In my teens, I would have, 2 to 3, up to 5 snakes. And then in my 20s, I started getting more snakes and started breeding them. And then when I was in my mid-30s is when I really started to focus on locality boas and building up the collection that I have now. So it's kind of escalated over the years. And so I estimate that my years of cumulative experience in terms of snake years is currently somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 snake years. And depending on how I do the calculation, for example, when you are talking about baby boas that you have for just a few months as you're getting them ready, perhaps you have 100 baby boas and you keep them for an average of 3 months before they're off to their new homes. That right there gives you a experience of 25 snake years just based on those babies. And so the actual calculation is, might vary depending on exactly how you do it, which is why I came up with that range. So I think it's a pretty good level of experience. I know there are a lot of people that have quite a bit more. In fact, I saw on the VPI website and David and Tracy Barker's biography, they said that each of them has over 10,000 snake years of experience. And that website went up like in 2006 is the date on it. So they probably have thousands of experience or thousands of snake years more of experience since then. So of course I'm still learning a lot. That's what's great about keeping and breeding locality boas. It's something I don't think you can ever really master, and there's always more information to be learned. And you could look at people at large snake breeding facilities. It's possible that a lot of these people that have thousands of snakes, they're getting more experience in terms of snake years every year than my full cumulative experience over the last 40 years or so. But I feel like I have learned quite a bit in the time I've been doing this. Of course, there's always going to be more to learn, and that's what's so great about keeping and breeding these beautiful animals. So that was a little bit about experience when it comes to keeping and breeding boas. I'd be curious to hear what you think of the snake years concept, and if you think that there's other better ways of estimating one's experience keeping these animals. So please comment below. I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to shoot me a line. Thanks for watching, and enjoy your boas.